Suppose I reveal to you that the United States' $34 trillion debt was always intended to remain unpaid, not due to impossibility, but because it was intentionally structured this way. All politicians speak about cutting the deficit. Every campaign cycle guarantees financial accountability. However, beneath these refined declarations lies reality. The debt isn't an error. It's an integral component of the framework, an instrument of dominance. Consider T's. Rising prices diminish your earnings. Living expenses increase while your nest egg decreases. Nevertheless, somehow, the financial markets continue rising, and the identical small group of monetary powerhouses continue gaining regardless of which administration holds power. Chance, occurrence, or intentional planning. The reason is this uncomfortable reality. Starting in the year the Federal Reserve came into existence, the United States monetary framework ceased being about prosperity and began being about debt administration. The currency transformed into a pledge constructed on pledges, a monetary unit supported by nothing except trust and obligation. And presently, following more than 100 years of accumulated control, we've reached the critical threshold of $34 trillion, peak that was always intended to remain. Before we proceed, rapid verification from where are you viewing? Share your nation or region in the responses. I'm curious to discover how widely this reality extends. And for newcomers, click subscribe. The information you're going to discover is the type of reality the established media cannot, or refuses to speak publicly. Let's travel back to 1910, to a location named Jekyll Island, a restricted getaway situated off Georgia's shoreline. 7 individuals stepped aboard a confidential train using fabricated identities. Within this group, legislators, financiers, and the agents of J.P. Morgan and Rockefeller Enterprises. Their conversation there would transform the worldwide economy permanently. Their objective? To establish a central financial institution sufficiently influential to manipulate the availability of currency, lending costs, and, ultimately, administrations themselves. By 1913, the Federal Reserve Act received approval. Throughout the holiday break, when the majority of Congress members weren't even in attendance, hardly anyone understood that this legislation transferred authority of the country as currency, availability to a private financial alliance masked as a governmental entity. Does this ring a bell? Private enterprises influencing governmental rules secretly. It's remained the identical strategy ever afterward. Initially, the Fed guaranteed consistency. However, within several decades, it had discreetly established itself as the supreme intermediary, generating currency from emptiness and lending it to the American government with added charges. Exactly right. Each currency unit generated by the Federal Reserve originates in obligation. You understood that accurately. Currency equals obligation. Jump ahead to 1971. President Nixon terminates the gold standard, severing the last connection between the currency and physical worth. From that instant forward, currency transformed into an idea, a conviction framework administered by a central clergy of finance. The outcome: unlimited obligation, boundless currency generation, and a framework that penalizes those who save while benefiting those who borrow. The identical process that destroyed economies in 1929, 2008, and almost once more in 2020, is identical to the one that constructed the basis for the United States' $34 trillion obligation. Hearing that figure, 34 trillion, makes it simple to disconnect. It appears intangible. However, visualize it this manner. If you contributed one currency unit each moment, it would require more than 1 million years to settle. Nevertheless, the administration doesn't appear concerned. For what reason? They have no plan to settle it. They simply extend it, distribute additional securities, and allow upcoming generations to bear the weight. In the contemporary framework, obligation isn't a burden, it's influence. Obligation provides authority. It permits those who distribute currency to determine who succeeds, who fails, and the timing. Examine history. Each domain that transitioned from tangible supported to obligation-supported currency ultimately collapsed. Rome, France, Britain, all submerged in their individual paper commitments. And the United States were pursuing the identical sequence. This is where the narrative becomes more sinister. Most individuals believe the American Treasury distributes currency. However, it doesn't. It distributes securities, written pledges. And these written pledges are purchased by the Federal Reserve employing currency it generates from emptiness. That represents the magnificent deception. The Fed doesn't need to locate currency, it generates it. However, each occasion it does, the administration is liable for charges on that generation. Therefore, as long as the United States exists, the obligation can never reach zero, since the currency required to settle the charges doesn't exist until additional obligation is distributed. It's an endless movement apparatus of reliance, a framework constructed to maintain the nation attached to an unseen lender category. And tracing that framework to its origins reveals a network of global central financial institutions, distant establishments, and private concerns, all gaining from the United States obligation dependency. One identity connects everything. A person concealed in obvious view, whose regulations made this downward path inevitable. You won't accept the identity. That identity was Alan Greenspan, the Federal Reserve leader who held office from 1987 to 2006, more extended than any other individual in history. Throughout Greenspan's period, the United States mastered the technique of the obligation deception. He removed regulations from Wall Street, promoted lending, and advanced the notion that the administration could handle obligation through intelligent strategy instead of financial restraint. Let's analyze it. Step 1. The unlimited borrowing fiction. In 1987, following the equity market collapse, recognized as Black Monday, Greenspan established the Plunge Protection Team, a partnership of governmental and private organizations assigned with maintaining market stability. However, its actual function was providing Wall Street a security cushion. Each occasion danger materialized. The Fed intervened with cash infusions. By the closing 90s, the technology speculation was expanding. Then arrived 2001, the internet company collapse. Greenspan generated currency, reduced costs, and made obligation less expensive. Lending transformed not merely into an instrument, but a doctrine. Step 2. The emergence of extractive economics. The 2000s witnessed the emergence of derivatives, monetary instruments of enormous devastation, as Warren Buffett subsequently labeled them. By 2008, the worldwide derivatives marketplace was calculated at $1 quadrillion, correct? With a Q that exceeds 10 times the worth of the worldwide economy. This framework didn't generate genuine prosperity, it generated demands on prosperity. Written commitments layered on additional written commitments, all reliant on inexpensive borrowing. The powerful elite understood precisely their actions. They converted the economy into a gambling establishment, and they possessed the establishment. Step 3. The massive rescue cycle. When the framework ultimately fractured in 2008, $700 billion was immediately assembled to save the precise establishments that triggered the breakdown. Subsequently arrived quantitative easing QE, a pleasant term for a currency generation. Throughout 2008 and 2014, the Federal Reserve generated more than $4.5 trillion from emptiness to encourage the economy. However, that currency didn't reach you. It reached financial institutions, investment firms, and property markets. The consequence: the wealthiest 1% obtained more than 80% of recovery period prosperity increases. And presently, in 2025, the identical sequence persists. Each emergency, health crisis, conflict, or downturn transforms into a chance to increase obligation, enhance reliance, and centralize authority. Step 4. The currency imprisonment. This is the harsh contradiction. The American currency remains the planet's primary currency. This signifies other nations must possess currency units to conduct business internationally. Therefore, when the United States generates additional currency, the remaining planet receives the rising prices. This is what financial experts term the extraordinary advantage. However, advantage accompanies danger. As international countries, from China to Saudi Arabia, start transitioning toward alternative commerce frameworks and electronic currencies, the basis of the currency framework is deteriorating. And when that moment arrives, the obligation won't merely be unsettlable, it will be irrelevant. Since remember, obligation is only significant as long as individuals accept settlement is achievable. Once that acceptance expires, so expires the domain. Step 5. The concealed mechanism, government securities. Each occasion you learn that the administration increased the obligation limit, what's genuinely occurring is the generation of fresh government securities. These are fundamentally written pledges that the Fed purchases with currency that didn't exist previously. As of 2025, more than $26 trillion of the United States' complete obligation is possessed by the population, indicating retirement accounts, businesses, and international administrations. Another $8 trillion is intergovernmental possessions obligation the administration is liable to itself. This circular obligation arrangement guarantees that settlement is arithmetically unachievable. Even if the administration collected charges on each currency unit of earnings, it wouldn't satisfy the charges. Step 6. The genuine masterpiece obligation as population authority. This is the component hardly anyone grasps. Obligation isn't merely monetary, it's mental. A population weighed down by payment cards, educational loans, and increasing expenses become simpler to direct. They labor more extended, challenge minimally, and rely increasingly on the framework that's gradually exhausting them. In alternative terms, the genuine purpose of the United States $34 trillion obligation is undight financial. It is psychological. It maintains inhabitants pursuing, lending, and complying. Greenspan once stated, "The United States can settle any obligation it possesses, because we can continuously generate currency to accomplish that interpretation." Boundless obligation equals boundless authority. As long as they direct the generation apparatus, they direct the population. And that's the major discovery. The United States $34 trillion obligation was always intended to remain unsettled. It was intended to be everlasting, a functioning mechanism of authority that guarantees the Fed, Wall Street, and their worldwide equivalents remain essential permanently. We're existing in the conclusion of that construction. The American nation presently accumulates $1 trillion in fresh obligation each 100 days. Charge settlements alone are anticipated to exceed $1 trillion annually by 2026, greater than the complete military expenditure. Each domain in history has confronted this instant, when growth converts to depletion and written commitments substitute genuine output. Rome reduced its currency worth. France generated assignats. Britain expanded the pound, and each occasion, breakdown pursued refusal. The frightening component, our framework is quicker, worldwide, and electronic. The upcoming breakdown won't require decades. It could occur immediately. When trust shatters, currencies expire rapidly. And if the currency collapses, the consequence will contact each area of the globe. However, perhaps, just perhaps understanding the reality provides us a possibility to arrange, to challenge what we're informed, to require openness, and to reconstruct something truthful from the destruction. Since the initial phase to liberation is understanding the restraints are constructed of metal, they are reconstructed of obligation. Therefore, what's your opinion? Are we more knowledgeable, presently? Or merely traveling the identical route in superior attire? Share your perspectives in the responses. And if you're exhausted from monetary deceptions, click subscribe. This platform is where we reveal the framework, one hidden truth at an occasion. Since the reality about the United States $34 trillion obligation isn't merely historical, it's our destiny.